I told a story last week and a lot of people liked it. And some even asked me to tell another story. So this is one I told on Prairie Home Companion. I wrote it in 2000. For my last 2 years of college, I lived at home on the south side of Chicago, and I went to school in the Loop. My daily commute was on buses and L's, but on Fridays I would take my mother's car, drive downtown, and park for free in the Field Museum lot. I'd then hike over to an old 8-story building on Van Buren that housed the Chicago Conservatory of Music. I was a trombone major there, and in addition to trombone, I studied piano and music theory and counterpoint and all the stuff that music students study. The highlight of my week was the Friday night student recital in Collins Recital Hall. The hall was on the top floor of the school, the 8th floor, and it was about the size of a double classroom. It had maybe 35 or 40 folding chairs and a small stage and a grand piano on it. It was there on my trombone that I played plenty of Baroque cello sonatas, several unmemorable French concert pieces by unmemorable French composers. And at least once a semester, I made an attempt at the ever-popular Hindemith trombone sonata, ever popular with trombonists and nobody else. Late one Friday night, after another attempt at the Hindemith, I rode the elevator from the top floor down to the first with the most beautiful girl at the conservatory, a piano major who drove a Carmen Ghia convertible. Oh, we'd flirted plenty before that night, and on the elevator she drew close to me. She smelled of Here's My Heart perfume by Avon and Sen breath sweetener. You want to go for a ride, she says. It was a perfect May night, and we put the top down on the Carmen Ghia, and she drove north on the outer drive up to Evanston, circled around, and drove me back to the Field Museum parking lot. We kissed before parting. Don't forget to call, she said. I got in my mother's Plymouth and I headed south on the outer drive. On the radio was Richard Strauss's Don Juan. This, I thought, is what my life is going to be. Great music, beautiful women, and fast rides. At 50th Street, a cop pulls me over, makes me turn off Don Juan, takes my license, and has me sit in the back seat of the squad car. He talks to the dispatcher for a while and finally turns around to me and says, Mr. Zimmerman, you have been driving well above the speed limit for several miles. Until this point in my life, no person of authority had ever called me Mr. Zimmerman. I wanted to take a moment or two to savor my arrival at adulthood, but the cop continued. You got a speeding ticket 2 months ago. You get another one, and you know what happens. Yeah, I knew what happens. I'd lose my license for a year. Several summers, I worked as a parking lot attendant at McCormick Place, the old McCormick Place. It burned to the ground in 1967. My fellow employees there were all off-duty Chicago cops. Oh, they told me their stories and instructed me in their ways. I knew the words this cop wanted to hear. Officer, is there any other way to resolve this thing? What'd you have in mind, he said. I don't know, is there some way we could just take care of this and make it easy on both of us? He went silent on me, and I stared out the window at the passing traffic. Finally, he turns around and says, I need a double sawbuck. That's $20. Leave it on the back seat when you get out. Now, I had known from the cops I had worked with at McCormick Place that the rock bottom price of outer drive commerce was $10, not 20. All I got on me's $10, I tell him. All you got is $10, he says. Yeah, I say, I'm a student. trombone major at the Chicago Conservatory. Leave it on the back seat when you get out and get the hell out of here, he says. I opened my wallet, took out a $10 bill. In the wallet was another one, and I had known that from the start. God, I was good. 20 years old, and on the same night, I played a near-perfect performance of the Hindemith Trombone Sonata. I kissed the most beautiful girl at the Chicago Conservatory, and I bribed a cop on the outer drive for $10. Not bad. The next morning at breakfast, I sat with my mother and grandfather, and I told them the story of the bribe, but I said nothing about the beautiful girl. Somewhere in Chicago, there was probably some kid telling his folks that he got a full tuition scholarship to Northwestern, or maybe he was accepted by Harvard Medical School, but no family was as proud as mine. You got a cop to come down $10, my grandfather says. Jesus Christ, that's really something. My mother sees the bribe as a sign that her son has finally reached adulthood. You're just like your father, she says. You know exactly what to say to people. You've got the gift. Oh, I was all pumped up, so I called a beautiful girl, and we made arrangements to get together that night. She lives in the suburbs, and I say this because it is significant. I drove to her house, and her father answers the door and has me in. The family's sitting around the dinner table. They just finished supper, drinking coffee and having dessert. They had me sit down, and the father asked me about what I study and what I plan to do with my life. It was there at that table that I told the story of my $10 ride on the outer drive. You bribed a police officer, the father said, with absolutely no trace of admiration. I look around the table and everybody's staring down. These people didn't want me there. What my family considered a wonderful coming-of-age event, her family viewed as something like a mortal sin. The beautiful girl and I said our goodnights early. I don't think we should see one another anymore, she said. She offered no further explanation, and I didn't need one.